Many people apply it to nuclear, the ring, to particularly the nuclear bomb, don't they? I think that was in my mind, is the whole thing is only an allegory of it. Well, it isn't.
With rings of power committed to allegory and political messaging, things that the professor despised, we see A.D.A.R chained with others after they have been captured by orcs. The orcs are conspicuously pale-skinned, and it seems an overt, typically unsubtle message to convey to the audience. But consider Tolkien's own words on allegory, of which he mentions numerous times in letters over the years. In letter 181 to Michael Straits: Dear Mr. Strait, thank you for your letter. I hope that you have enjoyed The Lord of the Rings. Enjoyed is the key word, for it was written to amuse in the highest sense, to be readable. There is no allegory, moral, political, or contemporary, in the work at all. To Sir Stanley Unwin in letter 109. But in spite of this, do not let Rayner suspect allegory. There is a moral, I suppose, in any tale worth telling, but that is not the same thing. Even the struggle between darkness and light, as he calls it, not me, is for me just a particular phase of history. One example of its pattern, perhaps, but not the pattern. And the actors are individuals. They each, of course, contain universals, or they would not live at all. But they never represent them as such. Of course, allegory and story converge, meeting somewhere in truth, so that the only perfectly consistent allegory is a real life, and the only fully intelligible story is an allegory. And one finds, even in imperfect human literature, that the better and more consistent an allegory is, the more easily can it be read, just as a story, and the better and more closely woven a story is, the more easily can those so minded find allegory in it. But the two start out from opposite ends. You can make the ring into an allegory of our own time, if you like, an allegory of the inevitable fate that waits for all attempts to defeat evil power by power. But that is only because all power, magical or mechanical, does always so work. You cannot write a story about an apparently simple magic ring without that bursting in, if you really take the ring seriously, and make things happen that would happen if such a thing existed. And finally, in letter 203 to Herbert Shiro, there is no symbolism or conscious allegory in my story. Allegory of the sort 5 wizards equals 5 senses is wholly foreign to my way of thinking. There were 5 wizards, and that is just a unique part of history. To ask if the orcs are communists is to me as sensible as asking if communists are orcs. That there is no allegory does not, of course, say there is no applicability. There always is. And since I have not made the struggle wholly unequivocal, sloth and stupidity among hobbits, pride among elves, grudge and greed in dwarf hearts, and folly and wickedness among the kings of men, and treachery and powerless, even among the wizards, there is, I suppose, applicability in my story to present times. But I should say, if asked, the tale is not really about power and dominion. That only sets the wheels going. It is about death, and the desire for deathlessness, which is hardly more than to say it is a tale written by a man. As can be clearly seen, the showrunners haven't the foggiest as to Tolkien's intentions. The results are buffoonish, and obviously opposite to what the professor intended. Indeed, this is why he raised the issue of allegory so frequently in his letters. I appreciate these excerpts might be long, but I feel it is important to illustrate just how spectacularly wrong this show has gotten with some of the most basic aspects of Tolkien's work. It is revealed that the orcs are servants of the eponymous A.D.A.R. We are treated to another butchered insert, quite literally. With elf prisoners refusing to chop down trees, A.D.A.R pipes up that he will volunteer. Where have we seen this before?
I will take the ring to Mordor.
We're introduced to a long-anticipated aspect of Tolkien's mythos, Númenor. Visually, the civilization in the island that is Númenor is impressive, but even with superficial visuals, it is not long before the cracks appear, which we'll get to later. It is the depiction, the overall story of Númenor, which is presented to the viewer, that is amongst the many aspects of this show that is an affront to the great body of work which it claims to represent. Númenor was born from the descendants of the A.D.A.R, who were granted the island as the furthest point at which they could settle westward, mortals being forbidden from entering the Undying Lands. Despite this, the Númenorians flourished. They colonized and expanded their civilization eastward in Middle-earth. They were lords over lesser men, as they were the Dunedain, the men of the West, with a lifespan 3 times that of other men. The characters we are introduced to in this episode are a mockery of their true, noble selves in Tolkien's books. Take Miriel, for instance, who is placed as Queen Regent.
It never happened.
Miriel was meant to be the 4th Queen of Númenor, but was usurped by her cousin, Pharazôn. She is described as a woman of great beauty, smaller than were most women of that land, with bright eyes. Then there is Elendil. Elendil is seen here as a mere captain of the Sea Guard. Now, do not get me wrong, seafaring was a central aspect of Númenorian culture, but the show has gone out of its way to portray Elendil in a menial role. Elendil is of royal blood, being a lord of the Andúnir. He is a noble, a member of a household with great standing, though one which is established as being a cornerstone of the faithful, that is, those who are elf friends and maintain and respect the ban of the Valar. And there is, of course, his physical appearance. Elendil is known as the Tall, as he is almost 8 feet in height, towering over even his fellow Númenorians. The height of the Dunedain, and thus the Númenorians, is described in the unfinished tales. Thus Turangar was often called man-high, which at 38 inches gives an average height of 6 feet 4 inches. But this was at a later date, when the stature of the Dunedain appears to have decreased, and also was not intended to be an accurate statement of the observed average of male stature among them, but was an approximate length expressed in the well-known unit Ranga. The Ranga is often said to have been the length of the stride, from rear heel to front toe, of a full-grown man marching swiftly but at ease. A full stride might be well nigh a Ranga and a half. It is, however, said of the great people of the past that they were more than a man high. Elendil was said to be more than a man high by nearly half a Ranga, but he was accounted the tallest of all the Númenorians who escaped the downfall, and was indeed generally known as Elendil the Tall. We get the usual trend of strong women sneering at each other, as some of the most reprehensible and atrocious writing yet is generously lathered upon the viewer. And perhaps the most bizarre, and I mean bizarre, scene is engineered. In a purpose for what I can only assume is meant to convey Galadriel as an animal friend and a nature lover, she is given the opportunity to ride a horse. The expressions that contort across a stiff, twisting face can be best summed up by this.
Doctor, please.
All the while, Galadriel seeks knowledge in the Hall of Lore. There, Galadriel finally discovers that the meaning of the ominous symbol that has eluded her all these years is that it is actually an incredibly primitive map. Ladies and gentlemen, the commander of the northern armies. We are also introduced to a character who doesn't exist, Elendil's daughter.
We made this one up.
Elendil only ever had 2 sons, Isildur and Anarion. This is a character shoehorned for modern trends' sake. As an aside, she has earned a seal for the Guild of Builders. This later becomes a silly, clumsy plot device. But it should be noted that there were indeed guild houses, such as the Guild of Weaponsmiths, and more famously the Guild of Venturers, as described in the unfinished tales. We are reacquainted with the Harfoots, and the seemingly quaint society that was originally implied is shown to be a much uglier and cruel one. They readily abandon those who are injured, or may hamper the speed of the whole group. This means almost certain death, and the discovery of the vagabond who fell from the sky condemns Nori and Poppy. Not to worry, the oafish wizard is more than capable of shifting his weight, literally. Finally, we are witness to a most pointless scene, one which seems there to meld political imagery, a woefully shoddy CGI warg, and introducing the eponymous character, A.D.A.R.